Sarah was looking for a parking ticket. It was the 8th of January. 10 in the morning. Cold, the kind of cold that gets inside cars overnight. James had taken her car the night before. His BMW was at the garage having its brakes done, and he had told her, the previous evening, that he had paid a parking ticket on her behalf at the Tesco on Mill Road, and that the receipt was in the glove compartment in case she ever needed it. She had not thought about the receipt again. At 10 that morning, she opened the glove compartment to look for it. Underneath the receipt, folded, slightly bent, edged with red and gold foil, was a Christmas card. She opened it. It was signed with 3 names.
His, hers, and a child's. A child whose name I did not know. Whose handwriting was the careful, effortful script of a 6-year-old. Whose card to her father said, in careful capital letters, "Daddy, have a lovely Christmas, love from Rosie."
This is Sarah. 44 years old. A primary school music teacher in Cambridge. 2 children, both her own, Olivia, 14, and Ben, 11. A semi-detached on the north side of the city, an elderly Toyota that did not belong in this story, and a husband called James who had, in the 18 years they had been married, been by every available metric the kind of partner she had felt extremely lucky to have. James was 46. A consultant cardiologist at Addenbrooke's Hospital. The role required, as it had required for as long as Sarah had known him, occasional weekends on call, occasional overnight shifts, and a particular discipline about phone availability. Sarah had, for most of their marriage, considered herself fortunate to be married to a man whose work was, among other things, demonstrably useful. On the morning of the 8th of January, sitting in her own car in her own driveway, with a Christmas card in her hands that did not belong to her own marriage, Sarah revised, in real time, the way a clinician would revise a diagnosis when new information arrived, the previous 18 years of her life.
I sat in the car with the engine off and the heater off, and the temperature was about 3 degrees, and I sat there for an hour and a half. I did not weep. I read the card 4 times. The 4th time, I noticed that the woman's handwriting, the looped feminine cursive, was familiar. I had seen it before. On the Christmas cards we had received, every year for the previous 9, from a couple James had said were old colleagues from his medical school days.
A 2024 study published in the British Journal of Sociology, drawing on the records of 3,100 long-term affairs that had culminated in the disclosure of a previously unknown child, identified what the authors named the parallel life threshold. The threshold, the researchers wrote, is the moment at which an affair stops being a secret about romance and becomes a secret about logistics. The threshold is crossed when a child is involved. Once a child exists, the unfaithful partner is no longer maintaining a deception about who they spend their nights with. They are maintaining a deception about who they fundamentally are. About birthday parties they have attended in another postcode. About school plays they have driven to under cover of medical conferences. About the answer to the question, when their primary partner asks them how their day was, that contains, by design, an entire human being whose existence has not been admitted into the conversation. Of the cases studied, 52% of the parallel children had been born into the affair without contraceptive failure. The decision to have a child with the secondary partner had been mutual. In 34% of these cases, the existing primary marriage had been one in which the unfaithful partner had, at some earlier point, declined to have additional children with their primary spouse. James and Sarah had 2 children. They had stopped, by mutual agreement, in 2014. Rosie had been born, Sarah would establish, over the following 4 weeks, in 2018. Sarah and James had met in 1999, when they were both undergraduates at Cambridge, Sarah at Newnham, reading music, James at Christ's, in his 2nd clinical year. They had met in the way many Cambridge undergraduates met, at a college bar where Sarah had been singing with a folk trio and James, who had grown up in Yorkshire and was conspicuously the only person in the room who did not yet know any of the lyrics, had asked her, with what she had identified at the time as charming earnestness, whether she would teach him. They were married in 2006, after he had completed his junior years and she had completed a postgraduate teaching qualification. A small ceremony in a Cambridgeshire village church. James's older sister, Kate, a skeptical, observant pathologist 5 years his senior, had given a speech that had referred to Sarah as the only person who has ever been able to keep my brother's attention for longer than 90 seconds. Sarah had laughed. Kate had not, particularly, laughed. Olivia came in 2010. Ben came in 2013. After Ben, James had not wanted a third. They had discussed it twice, once in 2014 and once in 2016. The first conversation had ended with James saying that two felt, to him, like a manageable and complete family. The second conversation, in 2016, had ended with James saying that he was sorry, that he understood Sarah might want a third, but that the answer for him was, on reflection, no. Sarah had accepted this. She had not been certain, herself, that she had wanted a third. The conversation had been one of those marital negotiations that, in the way of such conversations, had been resolved by the partner who held the firmer position, with both of them telling themselves that this was reasonable. Rosie had been born in March 2018. On the morning of the 8th of January, sitting in her car, Sarah did the arithmetic in her head. Rose's mother, whom she did not yet know by name, but whose handwriting she had recognized, would have been pregnant in 2017. The same year James had taken on additional weekend rotations at the hospital, citing a colleague's prolonged absence due to illness. The same year their family holiday to Cornwall had been cut short by what James had explained, at the time, as a clinical emergency. In the same year that James had been declining to have a third child with his wife, he had been preparing, with another woman, to have one anyway. Sarah did not call James. She did not, contrary to what most of the people in her later life would assume she had done, call her own sister or her own mother first. She called Kate, James's older sister. Kate answered on the second ring. It was 11:32 a.m. Kate was at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, where she worked, eating a sandwich at her desk between two postmortems. She said, in the way she said most things,
"What's happened?"
Sarah said only, "Have you ever heard of a child called Rosie?" There was a pause on the line.
"Yes."
Sarah did not weep, even then. She asked Kate, in the calm, precise voice of someone receiving information they have already begun to expect, what she knew. Kate told her, in 7 minutes. The woman's name was Olivia Marwick. She was 41. She was a pediatric anaesthetist at Addenbrooke's. She was the woman from the Christmas cards, and therefore, retrospectively, from the dinner parties Kate and her husband had occasionally attended at James and Sarah's house in Cambridge over the years, where Olivia and her supposed husband Edward had been guests. Edward, as it turned out, did not exist. Or, more precisely, Edward existed. He was Olivia's older brother, a divorced architect in Glasgow, who had been recruited, at the start of the affair in 2014, to play the role of Olivia's husband at the small number of social events that required one. Rosie had been born in March 2018. She was now 6 years old. She lived with her mother in a small terraced house in Cherry Hinton, on the southeastern edge of Cambridge, for miles from where Sarah was sitting in her car. Kate had known about Rosie for 2 years. Kate said, on the phone, in the voice of a pathologist delivering information she had been prepared to deliver for the past 2 years.
"Sarah, I am so sorry. I should have told you. I told myself it would unravel without me. I told myself James would do the right thing. I was wrong about both. I am so sorry."
Sarah did not go inside immediately. She sat in the car for another 26 minutes. She watched her own front door, a green-painted Victorian door with a brass knocker that her own mother had given them at the wedding, and she made 3 decisions. First, that the children would not learn anything from her until she had decided what they would learn. Olivia was 14 and Ben was 11. They were her children. They were not James's audience. Second, that James would not learn what she knew until she had organized the next stage. Sarah was a teacher. She had spent her professional life managing situations in which she had information that small people in the room did not. She would, in this much larger and more delicate situation, do the same. Third, that the household would continue, for the next 10 days, to function as it had functioned for the previous 18 years. Olivia was about to start her GCSE mock exams. Ben had a music recital at the end of the week. The walls of this household, Sarah decided, would hold for 10 days. The walls of this household had been built by her, and they would hold, for the next 10 days, by her. She put the Christmas card in the inside pocket of her coat. She got out of the car. She went into the house. She made herself a cup of tea. She did not call James, who was, that morning, ostensibly performing a coronary angioplasty at Addenbrooke's, and who would in fact return home at 6:53 p.m. that evening, ask Sarah how her day had been, kiss her on the cheek, and read Ben a chapter of Treasure Island before bed. Sarah did 3 things in the next 10 days. First, over the course of the second day, while the children were at school, she drove to Cherry Hinton. She did not go to Olivia Marwick's door. She went to a small cafe at the end of Olivia Street, sat at a window seat with a pot of Earl Grey she did not touch, and watched the house. Between 3:30 and 3:45 p.m., a woman in a green coat, chestnut hair to her shoulders, a cream scarf, a small canvas tote, arrived at the door, holding the hand of a 6-year-old girl in a Navy school cardigan. Sarah watched the girl skip up the front step. She watched the woman unlock the door. She watched them go inside. She did not photograph them. Second, she went, on the third day, to a divorce solicitor in Cambridge, recommended by Kate. The solicitor, a woman named Helena Wright, listened to Sarah for 14 minutes without speaking, and then explained, with quiet precision, what Sarah's options were and what the financial implications of each one would be. Helena said, at the end of the meeting, that the existence of a parallel child was material to the financial settlement in ways that the existence of a parallel partner alone would not be, because James, she explained, had been concealing not only the relationship but a financial obligation to a third party for some years. Sarah asked Helena one question.
Helena. The little girl in Cherry Hinton. Olivia. James's daughter. What is my legal relationship to her?
Helena thought about it for a long moment.
Helena, the solicitor, said, legally, none. Morally, Sarah, that is for you to decide. If at some future point that little girl needs to know what happened in the days after her father's other family found out, you will be the person who tells her, or the person who declined to. There is no third option.
Third, on the 7th day, after Ben's music recital, after Olivia's first mock exam, after the household had held, Sarah called Kate, drove to Oxford, and spent the night in Kate's spare room. She drank 1 glass of red wine. She did not weep until just after midnight, in Kate's kitchen, when Kate handed her a cup of chamomile tea and said, in the voice of an older sister-in-law who had been waiting to say it,
"You did not deserve this. None of it. Not a single sentence of it."
Sarah wept for 40 minutes. Kate did not say anything else for 40 minutes. When Sarah was done, Kate refilled the cup, and Sarah drank it, and they went to bed. On the 11th day after the Christmas card, on a Saturday morning, Sarah arranged for the children to spend the day with her own sister in Saffron Walden. At 9 a.m., after the children had been collected, Sarah came downstairs. James was in the kitchen, in the navy sweater he wore on Saturdays, making her a coffee. He set it down on the table in front of her with the small private smile he had set down coffees in front of her with, on Saturday mornings, for 18 years. Sarah pulled the Christmas card out of the inside pocket of her cardigan and set it on the table between them. James, in the description Sarah would later give to Kate, looked at the card for 10 seconds, did not touch it, and sat down. Sarah said, in the voice she had been carrying inside her own throat for 11 days.
Tell me her full name. Tell me her age. Tell me the postcode. And then, slowly, James, as carefully as you would explain it to a colleague at a clinical case review, tell me the timeline.
James told her. He did not deny anything. He did not, contrary to what some of the men in studies of this particular crisis attempt, claim it had been a brief mistake. He had, by his own subsequent admission to Kate, planned the conversation he might one day have with Sarah many times, in his own head, and had concluded that the only version that did not insult her further was the version in which he simply answered her questions. He answered them for 2 hours. At 11 a.m., Sarah went upstairs and packed 2 suitcases. James's suitcases. She did this calmly, the way she packed for the children. She placed them in the hallway. She told James, who was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the Christmas card, that he had, at minimum, a daughter in Cherry Hinton who deserved to be the center of his attention now, and that she would be filing for divorce on Monday. She told him he could collect the rest of his things on Tuesday afternoon between 2 and 4 p.m. She told him one further thing.
You are still Olivia's father. You are still Ben's father. The conversations they need to have with you, in the next several months, will be the most important conversations of their lives. You will have those conversations. You will not be elsewhere when they need you. You will not once, James, not even on a Saturday afternoon for an hour, be at Cherry Hinton when Olivia or Ben needs you here. Do you understand?
James said he understood. He left at 11:47 a.m. He walked out of the house Sarah had decorated, carrying 2 suitcases she had packed, into a January morning that had been waiting for him. Sarah did not, in the end, contact Olivia Marwick. Olivia contacted her, 3 weeks after the disclosure, through a handwritten letter delivered to Sarah's school. The letter was 4 pages long. It said many things. Most of them were the things Sarah had expected: a partial admission, a partial defense, a description of how Olivia had come to believe that her relationship with James was different from other affairs because she had, in her phrasing, taken nothing that was not already being given up. Sarah read the letter once. She did not respond to it. She placed it in the bottom drawer of her bedroom dresser, where it remains. What Sarah did do, and this is the part of the story that surprised her, that surprised Kate, that surprised James, that surprised, for that matter, Sarah's own mother, was that she did not, on the matter of Rosie herself, harden. On the second weekend after James moved out, Sarah asked Kate to drive with her to Cherry Hinton. Sarah parked the car outside the small terraced house. She did not get out. She sat in the passenger seat and watched, for 40 minutes, an empty street. At 3:20, the woman in the green coat came out of the house with the small girl in the navy cardigan. They walked, hand in hand, in the direction of a small park 3 streets away. Sarah watched them go. She did not follow. On the drive back to Cambridge, she said to Kate,
Kate. That little girl did nothing wrong.
Kate said, no. She did not. Sarah said, and whatever James and Olivia and I do, the divorce, the settlement, the conversations with my own children, I do not want any of it to be a thing that small child ever has to feel the cost of in any way she is allowed to perceive. Whatever I cannot forgive, I am not going to let it land on a 6-year-old. That is not, Kate, that is not who I am. Kate looked at her sister-in-law for a long moment, and then she did something she had not done in 15 years. She put her hand over Sarah's hand. They drove back to Cambridge in silence. The divorce was granted in September, 8 months after the Christmas card. Sarah kept the house in North Cambridge. She kept the children, who lived with her on weeknights and saw James every other weekend at the small flat he had taken in central Cambridge, not, Sarah had insisted through her solicitor, in Cherry Hinton. James and Olivia Marwick did not, as it turned out, immediately move in together. They had, by the time of the disclosure, been seeing one another in the architecturally compromised circumstances of a long affair for more than 10 years. The transition to a simpler life was, by both of their later accounts, not without its difficulties. They have, 6 years later, settled into a kind of low-grade cohabitation that James, when asked once by Olivia, his daughter who is now in her 2nd year at university, described as, "We are mostly happy, I think, this is what we are now." Olivia, Sarah's daughter, not Rose's mother, found out 2 months after the disclosure. Sarah told her at the kitchen table, in language she had been rehearsing for several weeks. Olivia did not, in the moment, react in any of the ways the family therapist had warned Sarah she might. She listened. She asked one question. She asked the name of the little girl. Sarah told her. Olivia thought about it for a moment and said, Mum. She's my sister, isn't she? Sarah said, Yes, Liv. Half-sister. Your father's daughter. Olivia thought about it for a long moment and said, Right. I think when she's older, I might want to know her. Is that all right? Sarah, who had not been ready for this, but who had been raised by her own mother to absorb this kind of arithmetic in real time, said,
Yes, Liv. That is all right. That is more than all right. When she's older, if you want to know her, that is your decision, not mine. And not your father's.
Olivia, the daughter, was 16 at the time. Olivia, the daughter, met Rosie, her half-sister, for the first time 3 years later, on a Saturday afternoon in a coffee shop on Mill Road in Cambridge that Olivia chose. Sarah did not attend. James did. Rosie, who was 9 by then, brought her older half-sister a card she had made herself. The card said, in the careful, effortful capital letters of a 9-year-old, Dear Olivia. I am Rosie. I have wanted to meet you for a long time. This is my handwriting. Love from Rosie. Olivia, the daughter, kept the card. She brought it home. She showed it to Sarah, in the kitchen, that evening. Sarah read it twice. The first time, she did not weep. The second time, looking at the slightly less careful but recognizably identical capital letters of a slightly older child, she wept. She said to her own daughter, in the way she said many things now.
She is a kind little girl, Liv. Whatever else has happened. She is a kind little girl.
If you have been listening to this story, and you are someone who has, in a moment of ordinary household administration, found something that did not belong to the marriage you thought you had, this is what Sarah would say to you. She would say that the card you have just opened did not lie. She would say that your hands, on the steering wheel, on the kitchen table, on the inside of your coat pocket, are still your hands. She would say that the 10 days between finding out and confronting are the days in which you build the architecture of what comes next, and that those days are not wasted, and they are not weakness, and they are not delay. She would say that the children, yours, his, theirs,